Welcome. This is my new series on Hsing Kuntao Silat, starting with the first mini-series on the 6 dimensions of attack. Every martial art in the end comes down to the question, how do I somehow defend myself against an unwanted attack from the other guy, and how do I land my attack on him? So, before we go into the 6 dimensions of attack, we first must ask ourselves what, very generally speaking, constitutes an attack. So meet my new V.O.D, my video opponent dummy. Vampire inspired me to this idea. It's a very primitive thingy. We have some foam insulation pipe for an arm, we have a tie pad as a body, and we have a focus mitt for the head. Now, what is, in the most general terms, an attack? An attack is me sticking out an arm to touch the other guy, to have some telling effect on him. Or better, not just an arm, me sticking out any kind of limb to touch the opponent, to have a telling effect on him. If I have my senses together, I can usually stretch out maximum 3 limbs. If I am into Taekwondo or one of those arts where I jump, it could be 4 limbs. Obviously, if I do ground fighting, I could also attack with all 4 limbs, because I'm supported by the ground by lying on the ground. For the usual stand-up game, an attack is stacking out 1 limb to touch the opponent, 2 limbs to touch the opponent, 3 limbs to touch the opponent. That's about it. Now that in very general terms we know what an attack is, of course the second half of that sentence becomes interesting. It is sticking out my limb in order to have a telling effect on my opponent. So what telling effects can we distinguish? There are 4 telling effects that we could distinguish. The first is a so-called kinetic attack, a speed attack. A speed attack means that I accelerate a part of my body to get really quick to the target. Speed attacks dump kinetic energy into my opponent. The typical result of a speed attack is tissue damage. I cut open the skin, I break the bones, or if it is in the body, maybe I send a shockwave into the body and rupture an internal organ. So tissue damage is the usual result of a speed attack, of a kinetic attack. The purpose is sticking out a limb to dump kinetic energy into my opponent. It usually looks like this when it hits. Not much movement. The second telling effect could be I stick out my limb and transfer momentum, in which case my opponent has a tendency to move. If I transfer momentum, usually this is not quite as quick as a kinetic attack, and I usually have my whole body mass behind it. The 2 classics for a momentum attack would be, say, a push hand situation in Tai Chi, where I push the other guy and he goes flying for a couple of yards. Or the other, also classical solution, would be me, and I think we see that right here, would be me, jab, cross, hook, uppercutting, moving the head. And if you see, I have almost all my body mass behind that uppercut. So, and it moves the head. So I want, with a momentum strike or a momentum attack, I want to move my opponent, or I want to move part of his body. So, what is the third kind of telling effect we could have? We could definitely want to put and dump torque into our opponent. So in other words, my opponent is turning. A bit difficult to do that with my V.O.D. So let us assume my V.O.D. blocks me from the outside and puts torque in me. Typically what this does, it turns me around and closes me up. Likewise, if I attack him and he gets me on the inside and dumps torque in me, Typically what this does, it opens me up. More likely than not, if we want to dump torque into our opponent, we have to put both hands on our opponent. And the one will push and the other will pull. So then, voila, torque, the whole thing turns. Note that this nice and civilized turning on my body when somebody dumps torque in me only happens when the torque is put into me exactly on one axis. If the body has several rotational axes, if I put the torque somehow diagonally, so that, speaking as a physicist, I dump torque on at least two axes, what happens is the body twists. And twist usually results in the loss of balance. See? If I get twisted because part of my shoulders move one way, part of my hips move the other way, what happens is not only it gets my body turned, but it gets twisted and I fall to the ground. That is when somebody wishes to put torque in me. Mostly we see that in defensive actions, but it can, of course, be also a very aggressive offensive attack action to put torque. Now, there is one last way to put or to stick out the limb and have a telling effect on my opponent. The last way is a latch-on attack. In other words, I come in and latch onto my attack, to my opponent. Most likely, in a realistic scenario, this will be a clinch attack. I come in and latch on. But it may very well also be one of those wrist grabs that we all learn to defend against in the various self-defense courses, right? Note that trapping, for instance, is not a latching on attack, because the trapping misses the latching on. If I latch on, I have somewhere a real grip, be that a monkey grip where the thumb is up, or a real grip where the thumb is on the other side, or clinch where I have also closed my grip. The difference is, from a trap, if I stay here, my opponent just needs to walk back and is gone. Once I'm latched on and he moves back, he drags me with him. So a latch-on attack is something else. And those are the four intents of attack. A kinetic attack, one limb being accelerated to the highest speed possible, trying to achieve tissue damage. The momentum attack, the whole body dumping its momentum into the other guy, wishing to accelerate and move the other guy, or at least part of the other guy. The torque attack, where I at least wish to turn the guy, if possible twist the guy and make him lose balance. And finally the latch-on attack, where what I want to do is to limit the guy's mobility. Those are the four intents an attack could have. And that is true whether you are talking empty hand, or whether you are talking blade, or whether you are talking stick. For instance, that would obviously be a kinetic attack. I accelerate my stick to do tissue damage. I might as well also just push the other guy back. Maybe a police officer has experience with that. That would be a momentum attack. I could also put in something like this and apply some leverage, in which the guy turns or even twists. And of course, I might also use the stick for a kind of clinching or other attacks. The same is true to an extent when I have a speed attack. I cut my thumb nicely. Or maybe when I wish to push somebody back, I maybe want to dump some torque into the other guy. And of course, it may very well be that I somewhere hook into his flesh to immobilize him. I will grant you that with a blade this is a bit artificial. It is just to show that the basic considerations remain valid no matter what the type of the weapon. You could also use the same stuff if, say, you have a sword. You could have a kinetic attack. You could have, again, a pressing attack. You could have some torquing attack with your blade, and of course you could also use your blade to immobilize the guy. There is, I mean, on the V.O.D. this looks nothing like on the real thing, so I will have to demonstrate that on a partner, and I will do that in time. So for the moment this is just serves to illustrate stuff. Now, the next thing, after we have looked into the intent of the attack, obviously the next thing that I realize when I see it coming, I see from where is it coming from. So the next dimension of attack is the angle of attack. And we'll deal with the angle of attack next time. Thank you for watching. Thank you for your time. If you liked it, thumbs up and subscribe. See you around.